think we'll start the session now. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the Sumo Logic security workshop session today. By way of introduction, my name's Justin McGarr. I run the partner ecosystem for Sumo for Australia and New Zealand. And joining us in the session today, we have Frank Phillis from AWS, who's the Senior Specialist Security Solution Architect. So Frank will kick the session off, and Frank will then be followed by Mike Rain, who is the Solution Architect for our partners across APAC. And Mike will run through the Sumo Security Analytics overview and then take you through a workshop. We'll then have a short break, and then Mike will hand over to Stefan Tapp, who is our Cloud SIEM Enterprise SME, also responsible for the APAC region. And Stefan will take you through the day in the life of a SOC analyst using the Sumo Cloud SIEM Enterprise platform. So Frank, I'll hand over to you and let you start the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. Glad to have you all here today. I'll just share my screen. All right, there we go. So yeah, really excited to talk to you. This morning, before we hand back over to Sumo, I'll spend a little bit of time talking about AWS, the general concept of moving security left, and how you can be more secure by having your workloads in AWS. So to begin with, I just want to set the scene. There's several key concepts we have in AWS, and one of them is that you get to share your security responsibility with AWS. So we have a construct called the shared responsibility model. And in this, AWS is responsible for the security of the cloud. And that includes all the infrastructure that sits under the services that you use. Now, one of the things about AWS is, for us, security is job zero, and the AWS cloud has been architected to be one of the most secure and flexible cloud environments in the world. So this shared responsibility model, where we're doing this, taking care of security of the cloud, you as a customer take care of security in the cloud. And these are all the things that sit on top of AWS that you're actually using, the services you're consuming. So things like your data, platform applications, how you manage identity. In some instances, so for example, EC2, it could also be operating system, network, and firewall configurations. This means that you secure your workloads and applications that you deploy on AWS, and you've therefore got the flexibility that you need to put more emphasis on the things that matter to you, whether that's security and security of sensitive data or anything else, and you get to adjust your posture as needed. The beauty of this model is that all customers inherit the security of the cloud component. And the idea is that that component, this security of the cloud, has been built to satisfy our most security sensitive customers who've got workloads in defense, in other industries like health, finance, and others as well. So everyone gets the benefit of those protections. Moving on, when you do start to move workloads into AWS, you need some kind of a framework and reference, not just to understand how you're going to do that, but how you're going to do it really well. And the key way that we do that is providing a thing called the AWS Well-Architected Framework. And that framework has 5 pillars to it. There's operational excellence, security, reliability, performance efficiency, and cost optimization. So today, I'm not going to talk about all of those, and I'm going to explicitly focus on security, but I just wanted to introduce the concept that we have this tool, and it's actually built into the AWS console as well. And you can use this tool to get a benchmark of where you're sitting in terms of what we consider to be well architected in AWS. So in terms of security solutions that we have available, there's quite a wide range of them. And drilling down into security security from what I just showed on the last slide, there's 5 areas that we tend to focus on. And these are having strong identity and access management, having detective controls in place, having infrastructure and data protection, and also incident response capabilities. And there's quite a large number of tools that we've got listed here. So at the bottom, underneath the main white line there, you can see for each of those categories, there's a number of tools that that we provide, and you use those things as building blocks to configure yourself in AWS and then get your workloads running. They can help you at the infrastructure layer, all the way through to protecting your data with encryption, strong cryptography, whether it's at transit or at rest, and then all the way down to fundamentals like identity and access management, role-based access control, attribute-based access control, and things like that. So there's a wide range of services. You don't necessarily use all of them, but you get to choose the ones that you need to use to meet your requirements. And for today, because we're here with Sumo Logic, we're going to be talking a little bit more about the detective control side of things. So in terms of general security design principles in AWS, I briefly mentioned some of these, but I'll just dig into them a bit more. So implement a strong identity foundation is a key one. Having all your users preferably in one location and managing them from that location is a critical factor. And one of the things that we see a lot of is customers really need to have good processes around managing users. So not just getting those users set up, but there's a whole life cycle to that. Users come, they go, they change positions in the company, and all those things may affect the level of access that they have to your systems in AWS. So we give you the tools that you can use to manage that. Enable traceability is also a key one. So in terms of detective controls, understanding what's happening at your workload level, and also with the infrastructure that's supporting that is really important. And we'll look at this a little bit more. We also want to apply security at all layers, automate security best practices wherever possible, and particularly that can be in terms of deployment. So we talk about the idea of having guardrails, not gates. The idea is that we have a sensible set of defaults set up. So if people in your team need to either create new AWS accounts or create new workloads within accounts, they can do that quickly and easily. And the common set of guardrails that you apply always get run out with that deployment. Protecting data in transit and at rest is a critical one. So Werner Vogels, our CTO, often talks about the idea of dance like no one's watching and encrypt like everyone is, which is a really important thing to keep in mind. We also recommend keeping people away from data, and especially production data. So the idea is wherever possible, again, going back to this idea of automation, automate wherever possible, automate deployments and rollouts, and then whenever you need to make changes, go back to those automations, to those CI/CD pipelines, and use them to update your infrastructure and applications as necessary. And finally, prepare for security events. So again, coming back to that idea of incident response, at the very least, one of the things we talk about is having a good idea of what security events you may be expecting to occur, and having at least manual playbooks can help you respond to those. Once you get to a greater level of maturity, some of those manual things that you've created, you can then take those and turn them into automations. And a great way to do that is if you have a set of incidents that you have a well-defined definition of what constitutes that particular incident, and then you have a well-defined set of steps that you need to take to mitigate that, those types of things are great candidates for automation, and that's a really important thing to consider on this journey as well. And again, with AWS, we've got tools that can help you do that, from detecting the incident through to understanding why it happened, and having a set of services that you can use to further gain insight. And Sumo can help you with this as well, with some really cool tools, and they're going to talk about that soon, to gain insight into the event that's happening and then take some kind of action based on that. So with that, let's dig a little bit into threat detection. And this has been quite a hot topic lately. Now, in AWS, if you're interested in threat detection, and really you should be, there's some key data that you're going to be interested in to gather the required intelligence that you need to understand what's happening. And there's a few things listed here. So first thing is AWS CloudTrail. CloudTrail gives you an API view of what's happening in your AWS account. So as you know, with AWS, when you interact with services in AWS, using an API to do that. So, and all our services have them. So EC2 has an API, identity and access management has one, et cetera, et cetera. And CloudTrail is used to log all that API activity. Increasingly, not just management plane events. So for example, when you go and create an EC2 instance, but also data plane events as well. So I think about 12 months ago or around that time, we introduced additional enhancements to CloudTrail that now let you keep track of what's happening with S3 data events, for example. So you can log all that information in your trail. So really important bit of information for understanding what's happening in your AWS accounts. Another thing is flow logs. So you're using VPCs, virtual private networks. You set up subnets within those VPCs, and then you put resources in them, whether they're EC2 instances, RDS database clusters, etc. You want to understand what's happening at layer 3 and layer 4 in terms of that flow of information, that flow of network traffic between your resources and the outside world outside of AWS. Amazon CloudWatch is another great tool. You can use it to gather and store log information. You can also use it to understand metrics, key metrics for your resources. So for example, EC2 processor usage is a good one. You can also gather enhanced metrics for other things around the performance of those EC2 instances and a whole bunch of other resources, including load balancers, CloudFront distributions, RDS, etc. Then finally, DNS logs. In terms of threat detection, again, you want to understand what kind of DNS names are your, for example, EC2 instances looking to resolve, and why are they looking to resolve them? And there's some other services that can help you with that. So far, we've got these 4 things that I've listed here, and there are others, but these ones are critically important. And if you think about, let's take CloudTrail, for example. It could be that you've got one AWS account, or you could have hundreds or even thousands. And within each of those accounts, you could have hundreds or again, thousands of API calls per second happening across those accounts. So there's a lot of information that you're gathering here. You need a way to get some intelligence and understand actually what's happening in your account, or looking at this data as a whole, not just these discrete 4 units that I've listed here, but is there any correlation between what's happening with one of these things, say, for example, Amazon CloudWatch, and the type of API calls you're seeing in CloudTrail. So you need some intelligence beyond just gathering these logs. So what I'll do now is talk briefly about guard duty and what guard duty does. And obviously I'm kind of building up to this from some of the things I've just talked about. So guard duty takes that information that I've just mentioned in the previous slide, minus the CloudWatch information, and it analyzes that data. And then it uses that analysis to detect whether there is potential malicious activity in your AWS account. So enabling guard duty is a pretty straightforward affair. A few clicks in the AWS console and it's enabled. Once it's enabled, and you can enable it for multiple accounts as well if you're using AWS organizations, once it's enabled, it's continuously analyzing the information that I spoke about in the last slide. So it's looking at that. It can then make judgments about whether behavior may be anomalous or not in your AWS account. So it's intelligently detecting threats. It's using things like managed rule sets, integrated threat intelligence, anomaly detection, and machine learning to intelligently detect malicious or unauthorized behavior. Once it's done that, you can then leverage actionable alerts. and you've got some insight into which is the critical piece of what's happening in your AWS accounts. And all this is still leading on to something else and how you can further ingest this information into other services, including Sumo. So a brief look at how guard duty works. We've got data sources. So I spoke about those things. We've got VPC flow logs, DNS logs, and CloudTrail management events. And not that long ago, we added the ability also for CloudTrail S3 data events. So for now, guard duty is also looking for anomalies related to S3 events as well. We've then got threat detection types, and these are things that we have in guard duty, and it's all in our documentation. And it basically, threat detection types in guard duty are certain kinds of activity that we consider to be malicious. So for example, command and control activity, Bitcoin mining, these are all things that you're going to want to know about if there's the chance that you have resources in AWS that are somehow gotten compromised or involved in those things and are going to want to take action on. Then on the guard duty side, we're looking for anomaly detection as well. So for example, you have an AWS account. Within that account, you have IAM users and roles. Those security entities, those security principals are making API calls. You want to know if suddenly those security principals start making API calls that may be unexpected. Nothing is suspicious about the call itself, but again, over a period of time, what's the trend? Are we seeing something here that's different? So for example, a user is based in a certain part of the world, and we always see API calls coming from that user from that part of the world. If we see them suddenly making API calls from a different location, and perhaps even within a certain time frame where travel is improbable, that's something you'd want to know about. And guard duty will help you with that. So the other thing it can also help with is unusual user behavior. So if you've got users, they're regularly making API calls as part of their duties, then suddenly they start making API calls that they don't normally make. You're going to want to know about that. So for example, launching EC2 instances, changing network permissions, enumerating information about your security principles, so looking up user information in IAM. Once it's gathered that information and done those assessments, then it creates findings. So guard duty creates findings. They can be either high, medium, or low. And in turn, you can send those findings into another AWS product called AWS Security Hub. AWS Security Hub gives you a single pane of glass view that you can use to look at your findings across a number of AWS services, including guard duty. So let's zoom out a bit and look at this from a higher level. So we've got this idea of ingesting and prioritizing findings. I'll talk about Security Hub now before wrapping up and how all this kind of fits into the larger picture. So we can forward findings into Security Hub from a number of services. And I just gave you the guard duty example. Security Hub allows you to organize these findings and sort them. It also allows you to create insights from them. So from a bunch of AWS services, we've got guard duty, and there are a lot of others. We've also got IAM Access Analyzer, Firewall Manager, AWS Firewall Manager, Amazon Macie, and a range of AWS services, approximately 10 at this time, are sending their findings into Security Hub. You can also easily configure findings from third parties that can also send findings into Security Hub. From there, you've got the option to configure additional partners and send those findings into partner systems so you can gain further insight and take action on them. And that's one thing that Sumo Logic is really awesome for. So what you would do is from Security Hub, you can then set up a pipeline into Amazon CloudWatch events or Amazon Event Bridge. You send those findings in and you use that service. Let's take CloudWatch events, for example, to filter through those findings, just pull out the ones you're looking for, or it could be all of them. That's up to you how you define that, and then send that information into a system like Sumo Logic, where you can then do further analysis and take action based on those findings. And what's more, you get to do it with a platform that you're familiar with and has the features that you need and that you want to use. So just to wrap up with, in terms of taking actions on findings, so I talked about this briefly. Here's some of the services that send information into Security Hub. These are the AWS ones, but as I said, there are a lot more from third parties. We dove a little bit into GuardDuty and talked about how it works and how it generates findings. Other services are going to send those findings in too. So Amazon Inspector allows you to assess your EC2 instances against certain security benchmarks and open CVEs and some other assessment types as well. Amazon Macie will go through, look at your Amazon S3 buckets and make a determination as to whether those buckets may be holding sensitive information. You get to define what that is. Great use case and a very common one is PIIs, so personally identifiable information. And again, if findings are generated from that service, it will send them into Security Hub. And as we said, there's a lot of third-party provider integrations, and you can actually write your own as well. From there, you send them into Amazon CloudWatch events. There's nothing you need to configure there. It just happens automatically. In CloudWatch events, you get to define filters to decide which actions you want to catch. So if you're just interested in findings from GuardDuty, you can easily do that. You can filter down to just get those findings. And then you've got a large range of target options. So you could send it into a partner integration, and Sumo's going to talk about that more in a moment. You've also got a large range of options in AWS. So great example is incident response. You see an EC2 instance, there's been a finding that indicates that perhaps that instance is involved in command and control activity. Once that finding for that instance gets sent through to CloudWatch events, you could then do something like send that information to a Lambda function and take action on that EC2 instance, whether it involves shutting the instance down, taking a snapshot of the disks attached to the instance, snapshotting the memory, and then maybe spinning up an instance in a forensic VPC that's isolated, and you can then do further analysis on it. Anything that you can do with an API or associated tools in AWS, you can do using these services here with these target options. It could be Lambda, Kinesis streams, further inspection using Detective, and a lot of other services as well. So there's a lot of flexibility. So going back right to the start of the presentation, is we give you the services, then you get to build those and put those services together like building blocks in the way that's going to make sense for you. Okay, and so just wrapping up, so we talked about AWS security services and a little bit about how you use them to create those building blocks that are going to get value for you and your business, and how you go about protecting your workload. So we moved from the idea of having some frameworks and some concepts like the shared responsibility model, the well-architected framework, drilling down into security, and then focusing a little bit today more on traceability. Everyone, thanks very much for having me. I'm going to hand it back to Sumo Logic.
Thanks, Frank. Really appreciate your insights from the AWS security perspective. Now, I would like to introduce everyone to Mike Rain, who will take you through the security analytics and monitoring capability of the Sumo platform. Mike, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Justin, and good morning, everyone. Mike Rain is my name. I'm one of the sales engineers with Sumo Logic, originally from Australia, but based in Singapore. So I can say good morning, and I think it's almost good afternoon for most folks attending from Australia. I'm going to share my screen and take you through an agenda today around the theme of security analytics in the cloud. So let me just start presenting here. Okay, so the agenda for the next probably 2 hours or 2.5 hours or thereabouts, we're going to, myself and a colleague, Stefan, we're going to take you through an introduction to who Sumo Logic is, just briefly. And we're going to talk about how Sumo Logic helps many AWS customers and customers doing things in a cloud-first or cloud-native approach, address security analytics and as the first session, and then later on this afternoon, Stefan's going to take you through a similar type of session around our Cloud SIEM Advanced or Cloud SIEM Enterprise offerings. So the format's going to be, we're probably going to spend 20 to 30 minutes running through probably half a dozen slides each, just to kind of set the context and give some background information. And then we have some hands-on labs where you'll be able to log on to a live environment from Sumo Logic. It has AWS and other application and infrastructure related logs in that environment for us to work with. And we're going to work through, in a workshop style scenario, some labs and some tutorials to allow you to see how easy it is to work with our platform and some of the types of ways we can render this raw, non-human readable machine data in the form of security events and security logs into quite rich visualizations, insights and analytics. So I'm going to run through the first session. We're then going to have a 15-minute break, allow you to grab a cup of coffee or check on the kids if you're working from home, etc. And then Stefan's going to come on and run the second part of the session. So that'll be the agenda for today. If you have any questions, I encourage you to ask them in the chat response, and we will talk with you interactively from there. So, I might just skip the slide there. So, what does Sumo Logic do? What does a solution entail? So, we refer to assisting our customers transforming machine data into continuous intelligence. So that's quite a mouthful, but what does it actually mean? And my internet can be a little bit flaky here, so I'm just going to stop my video while I'm presenting. So what does it actually mean? Because it's quite a mouthful. So what it basically means is that Sumo Logic log aggregates all of the different infrastructure and application audits and events and logs and metrics. If you're doing things with open telemetry or tracing and APM, etc., you'll see, as demonstrated here on the left-hand side, we pick up this raw non-human readable log information from all of your different sources. So you might be using half a dozen or more different AWS services, CloudTrail, CloudWatch, S3. You might have guard duty enabled. You might be doing things with AWS load balancers, Lambda serverless, CloudFront, all of these different services. If you're using a multi-cloud approach, then we can pick up the data from all of the different clouds out there as well. Potentially run hybrid IT. So you may have your own data center, or you may have some on-premise infrastructure working with your cloud environment. So the entire infrastructure landscape, all of these logs, events and audit data and metrics, whether the information is a structured log or it's an unstructured, just raw output coming from these systems, we pick up all of this information, we compress and we encrypt it, and we bring it up to the Sumo Logic cloud. The Sumo Logic cloud is 100% hosted from AWS. So if you're already leveraging AWS, that makes it very timely and very convenient to move this information into our service. And for any infrastructure that you have elsewhere, we will compress and encrypt it and bring it into one centralized location. What we're doing from there is we're turning that raw, non-human readable information into insights and analytics. And we're making it available to all different types of stakeholders in your business, whether they be technical, whether they be security orientated, developers, engineers, IT operations. They could even be non-technical stakeholders. So you could have an executive team or a sales and marketing function, human resources or something like this. We turn that into consumable intelligence based on the stakeholder that they are. And we do that around three main functional areas. The first one is around security use cases. So we refer to this as SecOps, and that's the one that we're going to be focusing on today. We also do this around DevOps. So for people in IT operations or developers and engineers, monitoring and troubleshooting infrastructure, finding bottlenecks and needles in a haystack, those types of things. And then likewise, we can look at the same data that we're collecting in either of these two cases, but look at it from a non-technical lens and derive business intelligence, or what we call BizOps use cases for non-technical or executive users. So everything we're going to show you today is in a single platform. There is not multiple pieces of technology to use and learning challenges to overcome. It's a single solution. You send your log messages to Sumo Logic one time, and then depending on your use case or your role within the business, or those types of things, you're able to derive what we refer to as continuous intelligence from this raw machine data. As mentioned, today we're going to focus on the security side of the house. So where we like to start with our customers is we generally like to understand what they're doing with the cloud. Cloud's been around long enough these days that everybody is doing something with the cloud. It's very rare, even amongst your own colleagues and associates, that if they work in IT or they're a modern business, that they're not doing something with cloud. And we typically categorize our customers into one of three various stages or buckets with regards to cloud adoption. So on the left-hand side, you see cloud migration. So at the bare minimum, we see the vast majority of customers doing something with cloud. So cloud migration would entail that potentially have on-premise IT, it's functional and serves your business, but you're doing things with cloud. Maybe you're using CloudFront for your content delivery. Maybe you have that content sitting behind AWS CloudFront load balancers. Maybe you're starting to migrate storage into S3. Maybe you're starting to use two-factor authentication solutions like Okta or OneLogin, or these collaboration solutions like G Suite or Office 365. So we would refer to these types of customers as in the cloud migration stage, still have quite an on-premise footprint, but starting to do more and more with the cloud. That progresses or transitions into the next caliber of customer, which is a cloud-first organization. So this would imply that maybe you have some legacy IT on-premise or some assets that you maintain, but you have a bit of a cloud-first mentality when it comes to new projects, new workloads, new initiative. You're not going to be putting any more racks and servers in data center. You're going to look to what AWS can do for you as a kind of cloud-first initiative or mentality. The third part of this is where we see more and more customers arrive at, or if your business has potentially began in the last 5 to 10 years, you may already be at this cloud native stage. So potentially you don't have any on-premise IT or very little anymore. You're using cloud native functions, things like microservices-based applications. You're using things with Lambda, serverless, EC2 instances, auto scaling groups, these types of things. So, we'd refer to customers in this bucket as being cloud native or a digital native business. So, I ask you to ask yourself, if you had to kind of categorize your organization, where do you sit on this bell curve? And I'll refer back to this slide as we continue to move through the presentation today. What this kind of cloud migration, cloud first and cloud native mentality or theme really introduces is that the way customers do security analytics, security operations and cloud SIEM is really changing, right? SIEM is not a new domain. It has existed for 10 to 20 years, but potentially you have what we would refer to as a legacy SIEM, and we see a lot of customers having done something in this space a period of time ago. And it doesn't really complement the fact that they are migrating and initiating new projects and deploying new workloads onto the cloud, because essentially legacy SIEMs were built for on-premise IT, right? This concept of a perimeter and a trusted environment and these types of things, they're all kind of superseded with cloud adoption. So this would be the first point that I make with regards to why organizations are looking at doing security analytics and SIEM into the cloud. Likewise, the extinction of the perimeter has dramatically increased the threat landscape. A lot of your infrastructure is potentially in a public cloud or accessible over public internet. So the threat landscape has changed, and digital transformation has really increased the attack surface for a lot of customers. And then, a byproduct of all of this new technology and microservices-based architectures and landscapes, distributed IT, etc., is that it's generating a huge amount of logs and machine data, to the point where it's becoming, or it's no longer a human scale managed problem per se. All right, so I'm going to give you an introduction now to the Sumo Logic security offerings. We have 4 different offerings that are all encompassing in one piece of technology. And the reason that we have 4 offerings is that when it comes to security, many customers are at different maturity levels, right? We have customers all the way having, really no experience or no expertise in their business around specific security functions, all the way over to, if you look to the far right, what we would refer to as cloud SOAR, which is, automating responses to different security events that are detected in the environment. So today we're going to focus on 2 and 3. We're going to focus on cloud security monitoring and analytics. We're going to give you a demonstration and do some activities in that kind of scenario, and around cloud SIEM as well. So we refer to this as our kind of security life chart. Think of audit and compliance as kind of a crawling stage from a security maturity perspective, cloud security monitoring analytics as a walking stage from security maturity, cloud SIEM as a running stage, and then cloud SOAR as a sprinting stage. So again, give some thought to where you see your organization sit from a security maturity perspective. But today we will focus where most customers sit. They don't typically sit at, I don't know how to spell security and have very little experience with it over on this audit and compliance side. Neither do they sit at the cloud SOAR side where, they've got dozens of security professionals dedicated to security in their environment. Most organizations sit in this middle phase here. Okay. So from a cloud security analytics and monitoring perspective, it's really about improving your security posture. So I mentioned before that, the Sumo Logic core functionality is that we pick up all of your log and event and metric data from all of the different infrastructure that you have. So this is a representation of some of the types of log messages and audit information that our customers send to us. So this is not an exclusive list. There are thousands of different applications and infrastructure that we bring in to Sumo Logic, but this will give you an idea as to the types of information, right? SaaS solutions, different cloud provider data, CDN data, microservices, endpoint security, potentially a developer stack, et cetera, et cetera. And when we bring that information in, we allow our customers to turn that raw text-based information into quite rich and fluid and real-time visualizations such as this. So you'll see that there's different types of graphs and charts and geographical lookup that we can render this raw information through to make it more consumable for an audience that has a medium level of security maturity, right? There are also lots of different ways that we can set notifications that when we see certain types of events or certain thresholds are met, or there is unusual activity, etc. When we see those things in your environment, that we can send alerts and notifications. And they don't need to fill up your inbox as spam or things like that. We can publish messages into Slack or Teams channels. We can open tickets in your ticket management system, something like ServiceNow or Jira, PagerDuty, those types of things. Included in the Sumo Logic solution is native CrowdStrike threat intelligence. So for a lot of customers that are either in their infancy or have a moderate to medium level of security maturity, they're not doing any kind of meaningful log aggregation. And in our experience, they typically don't have any type of threat-based intelligence subscription to leverage. So included in Sumo Logic at no charge is access to one of the best threat intelligence solutions in the market, which is CrowdStrike. So what it'll mean is that any log message that you bring in from your AWS environment or your collaboration, your environment, your email, your on-premise IT, all of that information will be able to be looked up against CrowdStrike's threat intelligence database. So we'll be able to see, hey, what are the different IP addresses and actors that are touching and associating themselves with your infrastructure and applications? What files are being run on your endpoints? Are there any known bad files? Are email addresses which are known to be no good interacting with your workforce and your customer base, et cetera, et cetera. And then the other thing that we allow our customers to do is that when your information is brought into Sumo Logic, you have the option to be able to allow us to anonymize that data and add it to our global intelligence threat benchmarking service. So what this will mean is that you're able to compare your security posture and your overall AWS environments from a security perspective and baseline that or benchmark that against thousands of other AWS customers that we have using Sumo Logic to kind of see where you sit. Hey, am I having an unusual number of these types of events touching my AWS infrastructure? How do I compare to other organizations? This type of thing. All right, so I hope I haven't put you to sleep with too many slides. I tried to keep it to a minimum. What we're going to do now is I'm probably going to run you through a demonstration of Sumo Logic, just so you can get a bit of a look and feel for the solution for the next 15 minutes. And then we're going to jump in and run through some labs where we'll work with some AWS load balancer data, and we'll look at what we can discover and decipher through that. All right. So from a Sumo Logic perspective, it's very easy for our customers to get started. Being that we're a cloud native service, they come to our website, they enter in their email, their corporate email address, and they indicate which AWS location they would like their tenant to be created. And we are deployed in the AWS Sydney location. So for customers in Australia, we can keep all of your data on-premise, onshore, and adhere to any data sovereignty requirements that you have. We also have our application distributed across other areas in Asia Pacific, Europe, North America, etc. So you'd come in, you'd sign up for an account, you'd verify your email address, and you're literally ready to go, right? So there's very little configuration or setup required. When you log on to the Sumo Logic platform, the first stage is that you need to start sending some log data to us, and we can provide some information on how to do this, or even assist you with that process should you wish. I won't go through it today. It is a little bit boring, but nevertheless to say it is quite straightforward. It is one of these things that we kind of set and forget, right? We start streaming that data into our service, and then as the logs are generated, within a couple of seconds, they're available in the Sumo Logic platform. Once the customer has some information in our core information platform or Sumo Logic, they then obviously want to visualize or interrogate what's going on with that data. And what you see on screen now is what we call our application catalog. And it helps our customers get started and gain insights from the different types of logs and infrastructure that information that they've sent to us by providing common dashboards, common visualizations, common searches that we know as a business, if you run that technology, you're going to be interested in knowing about this. So you'll see all the different kind of category of infrastructure and applications that we have this content for down the left-hand side here, right? And the section that I'm on at the moment is the AWS section, and you can see there are dozens of common used AWS services, things like CloudTrail, load balancers, serverless, Security Hub, WAF, Network Firewall, CloudFront, all the Dynamo DBs and Redis, GuardDuty, S3, VPC flow logs, etc. Whereas you can start to stream that information into Sumo Logic pretty effortlessly, right? You're running your workloads in AWS Cloud. Sumo Logic is deployed in the AWS Cloud. It's very easy for us to get that information in, and we can start to render some of that information into visualizations. So as a guide, if I was to come in and look at the CloudTrail application, then the AWS CloudTrail app helps you monitor your AWS deployments, predefined dashboards that present user and administrator activity, network and security information, CloudTrail console logins, and information on S3 and public objects. So you can see here that we have about half a dozen dashboards, searches, correlations, alerts that we have pre-configured here, and you'll see the name of the dashboard here on the left-hand side, and kind of a more detailed description on what that dashboard is going to show here on the right-hand side, where as you could come in and you could very easily point this to the logs, right? Install it, and then you're ready to go. You can start to visualize some of this information. So lots of our AWS customers are doing this for their AWS infrastructure, but you see that there are a lot of other applications that we have this for as well. You know, potentially you're still running Active Directory on-premise. Maybe you're doing things with Cisco devices or Silence endpoint security. Maybe you're doing things with Office 365 and G Suite. You know, we know that you probably run some type of database infrastructure, whether it be one of the SQLs or NoSQL, Mongoose, Redis, Redshift, RDS, these types of activities. We know that you probably have some type of web server, whether it be Apache or IIS or Nginx, these types of things. More recently, in COVID times, we've been developing more content for our customers around work from home solutions, things like Slack and Teams, you know, these types of Salesforce, these types of activities. So this is where a lot of customers start, right? Hey, I don't have a huge amount of knowledge in the security space. Potentially you have little to none dedicated security practitioners in your business. No problem, very easy to get going with us. Send us some of your common pieces of infrastructure logs and audits. We can help you understand the things that you should be interested in and should be looking at. As an example of what some of these applications look like. So, you know, we talked about some of the AWS ones. So if we look at the AWS CloudTrail app, this is an example, and I might just need to refresh this. This is an example of what some of these dashboards and visualizations look like. So this is just an overview screen showing the geographical locations of all of our AWS activity. We can see the number of activities we have in certain areas. So, you know, if you're a business that's operating, for example, primarily in Australia, and you have all of this activity coming from South America or from Eastern Europe or something of this nature, you know, it could be quite concerning. We can see here that the vast majority of our activity is coming from North America, right? And if we scroll in there, we can start to get, you know, a better overview of what's going on here, right? So this is a good way of demonstrating some of our integrations, looking up addresses, trolling through those logs, and you can see that Sumo Logic is an organization that's headquartered in California near San Francisco, and that's kind of representative that we're having the vast majority of our AWS activity coming from that location, right? If we were to move into a dashboard that contained lower level information on CloudTrail, something now specifically around, say, network and security, we can start to get an idea of things like failed authorization attempts and where they're coming from, the number of network security events over time, ACL ingress and ingress data here, you know, recent ACL changes, short-lived critical operations, these types of things. So typically this information is in a non-human readable format, right? This is a raw log message coming out of your AWS CloudTrail environment. So Sumo Logic cloud security analytics and monitoring is really around turning that raw data into rich visualizations. And as I mentioned, we can set different alerts and notifications and things of that nature. But when we see certain activity, we can notify you. Just as an example, if you are having any on-premise IT or any kind of hybrid environment, this is an example of a Cisco ASA firewall app. So, again, we would pick up this information from your on-premise environment or your data center environment and bring it in. This is just an example of, say, a non-AWS type of log source. The other thing that we do is I mentioned that we provide our customers access to the CrowdStrike threat intelligence with no subscription or licensing needed. And we have an app which allows our customers to see how's their security posture from a threat intelligence perspective. So this particular dashboard here is saying that in the last 15 minutes, and I could set this to the last 24 hours or the last 7 days or whatever I'd like, and we will on the fly go and interrogate that information and bring it back. And you can now see that in the last 7 days, there's been, well, it's still counting, right? 10+ million lines of log that have been sent to Sumo Logic for this customer, right? And in the last 15 minutes, if we look at this particular panel over here, in the last 15 minutes, we found more than 7,000 IP addresses cumulatively across all of those different log messages where CrowdStrike knew something about that IP address, right? Now, if the IP address is good and has a good reputation, CrowdStrike doesn't have any intel on it. But we found 7,000 addresses through this customer's infrastructure landscape where there were IP addresses interacting with their infrastructure, where there was some type of return or some type of result related to threat intelligence. Likewise, 142 files that had been executed on your organization's endpoints, where your endpoint detection and response solution, whether it be CrowdStrike or Carbon Black or whatever you're using in that space as an example, knew something about the file that had been executed, right? This is really, really good information. If you're not running a SIEM or doing any type of log aggregation or management, this opens our customers' eyes up, right? We could then drill in and look at this information in a little bit more of a detailed fashion. So if we look specifically at the IP information, right, we can start to get some information on where these bad actors are. We can see there seems to be a lot coming from Western Europe, right? Somewhere around the Amsterdam, Netherlands, Germany area. Hey, that could be a little bit potentially unusual. We're a North American-based company, right? We can get an idea of where these bad IP addresses are coming from within logs. So we can see, 32% of them in the last 15 minutes are coming out of guard duty. 21% of them are coming out of ELB logs, load balancer logs, et cetera, right? What I think is most important, and as kind of the last screen that I'll show you here as a part of this demonstration, is this particular information here, which is the raw threat information. So, if we come down and we pick something out, say we look at row 3 here, this particular address here, 104.236.2.253. The malicious confidence is high. CrowdStrike is very sure this address is no good, and the intel they have is very recent, reflective in the fact that the malicious confidence is high. We saw this coming in your ELB logs, and we saw that address appear 17 times in the last 15 minutes, and that address is known to be associated with a downloader, something around command and control and the C2 kill chain related to mummy spider malware, right? This type of activity. Likewise, if we look at the first hits, just as an example, 187, 185, 157.125, the confidence is low, which means that the data could be a little dated, or CrowdStrike's still gaining, doing further recon on the address. But we can see that this particular address has appeared in the Kinesis logs 71 times in the last 15 minutes, and it's known to be an SSH scanner. So clearly this bad actor is just out there scanning your environment, looking for open ports, those types of things. So this is an example and a brief demonstration of the Sumo Logic cloud security analytics and monitoring solution. Going to pause there just for a moment. Stefan, how are we going for questions? Do we need to address anything on the call before we get into doing the workshop?
No, we're all good at the moment, Mike. No open questions, but just a quick reminder, if anybody does have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A button down the bottom, and we'll do our best to answer those for you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. All right, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you just how easy it is to work with the Sumo Logic solution. We're going to run through a lab, and I'm going to do it on screen. And then we're going to give you the opportunity to be able to come along and do it as well, and log on to one of our environments and do it as well. So the first thing that we're going to need you to do is we're going to need you to log on to the Sumo Logic environment. So I will paste this information in the chat that you've got here, and I'll also leave it on screen. So need you to open a browser. I just come to the chat, but I'll paste it here so it's easy to copy and paste. So we need you to visit a URL. We should call this a URL here. service.sumologic.com. So let's do that together. All right, so once you've hit that website, we then need you to log on using a username or an email that you see here. And where you see the hashes in the training analyst name, we just need you to pick a random number, right? 007, 111, just a random number that you can log on with. You may just want to put in the chat what number you chose. I don't think we have 1,000 attendees today. So I think the chances of you choosing the same number as somebody else is probably not to the same degree as winning Tats Lotto, but probably in that domain. So if you'd like, put your number in there, and that'll just make sure that you're not using the same number as somebody else. And then the password, sept2021 exclamation mark with a capital S on September. So let me just follow along here. Okay. So once we've entered that information, we then want to sign on to Sumo Logic. Okay. It helps when you copy the right password. That is a surefire way to not be able to log on. Okay. All right, so when you log on to Sumo Logic, you should be sitting in a screen, something similar to this. Anybody has any issues, please raise your hand in the Q&A, and Stefan will be able to work with you to get you in there. All right, so from here, we're then going to run through our security analytics workshop. So we have a couple of different activities that we're going to do together. I'm going to paste some of these queries into the chat, so you won't have to sit here and type out all of this information. You'll just have to copy and paste it into your Sumo Logic panel, but we'll walk through what's happening here as an example. So activity number one we're going to cover is monitoring a user's login from different IP addresses. So all of the Sumo Logic visualizations are powered by a query. And that query is kind of similar but different to a SQL query. Probably that level of technical knowledge is needed to write the queries. The nice thing with all of the apps that we showed you is that we've written all of the queries for you. So there's nothing that you need to do. So this particular query that we're going to use here will help you identify users that have logged in from more than one IP address over a specific time range, right? users logging in from multiple IP addresses could be an indication that credentials are either being shared or being leaked or they're being phished and that type of information. We're going to work today pretty much exclusively with AWS data. But this type of search or query or use case, it could vary, right? So you could be having things like Windows or Linux logs. You could be using different SaaS solutions. We could apply this type of search to any log data that you're bringing in. But today we're going to use AWS data. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to look through the raw AWS data, and we want to look for successful logins and IP addresses that they've logged in from. So we're going to use this particular query here. Let me copy this. Let me paste it into the chat. Now, from experience, I need to so I need to remove this Sumo Logic confidential here because when I copy and paste it here, it also grabs the footer of here. So here's the message that you need to use. So if I copy that myself, and we come back to our Sumo Logic tab, from here we want to click New in the top left-hand corner, and we want to say a new type of log search. We can skip the tutorial if it's asking you to do that. And then in our log search, we hit our cursor in the top left-hand side here, and we right-click and we paste, and that query should paste in. And then we can hit enter. Okay, so if we've been able to successfully do that, we should have, your screen should look something like mine. So what we've done here is that we've run a search across all of our AWS CloudTrail logs, and we're specifically looking for the events in those logs related to console login. When we look at that data, we're then starting to extrapolate some fields of that data. And I won't spend too much time in the weeds on the query here, but we're extracting different pieces of information from that AWS CloudTrail log, namely things around event type, event name, source IP address, what was the user's login name, this type of information. And then some other logic here to allow us to render this information. So what we can see on screen is that we search it over here on the right-hand side. We search for this information over the last 15 minutes, right? But we could set this to any period of time that we wanted to search for, right? And in the center of the screen here, you can see that the status is done. It took less than 1 second to find that information, right? And we actually found 56 different results related to logins. And you'll see all of these different logins here. So you can see this user, B. Smith, is having lots of different logons into their into the AWS environments. And they're coming from all different types of source addresses. And this is only in the last 15 minutes that we're searching this information, right? So we've been able to drill in and kind of find that information very easily through using some of the pre-configured content that Sumo Logic has here. So if we come back to our workshop here, what we could also do is those IP addresses are great, but it doesn't really, it's not really visual. They're just numbers. I don't know. I mean, this could be legitimate activity. Probably not, but it could be. So, what we can do is step 2 is we can use our geolocation functionality to visually turn those IP addresses into plots on a map, on a chart, and see where those logins took place from. So we could then add this particular 2 lines to our search query. So just paste this into the chat here. And come back to your query. Now, in order to add to your query, if you just hit enter, it's going to run the query again, right? So if you want to move to the next line, you actually need to hold shift and hit enter, and that will drop you down to the next line. We can then paste in the lookup information, and we can hit enter again to run that query. Now we're looking up those IP addresses based on latitude and longitude. So at the moment, we're rendering this information only as text, but you'll see over here on the right-hand side that we can show this information in different ways, right? Now, obviously, to look at latitude and longitude information, we don't want to look at that as in a chart or as text, but if you click over on this particular icon, this is our mapping icon, and that's very relative to latitude and longitude information, right? So here, this is where we can see bsmith. Okay, we can really start to turn that raw log information, those raw IP addresses, and now we can turn it into something meaningful. Hey, if this user bsmith is located in Western Europe, why are they logging in from North America? Why are they logging in from Brazil, China? You know, they're obviously down here in Melbourne or maybe Geelong, where I'm from, right? So this is a good example of just how easy it is to be able to take raw information, search for the information that you're looking for using a query, and then turn that into something useful, something visual. And we could then stick this on a dashboard or stick this on a visualization with other information related to CloudTrail. We could also set alerts on this type of stuff. Hey, if a user logs in from more than X number of countries in X given of time, I want to send an alert. I want to send a notification around that. Great. All right, let's continue the theme. And again, if you have any questions, if you get stuck, if you need some assistance, please feel free to raise your hands. Stefan, if we need to, we can pause and just let me know, and we can drill down on any areas of interest or any areas of issue that our attendees may have. So, you know, if we
hang on, like 2 seconds. There's a few people saying they can't see the queries in the chat window.
Oh, okay. Are you able to see it?
I can, yeah. Let me just try and repaste it again. If I can get some confirmation from anybody, if they can see this one, I'll just paste the first part of the query in.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to bring it up on screen again as well, although it is quite an amount of text to type. I won't paste it again, Stefan, if you've pasted it.
Okay, I've just pasted it in again. Let's see how we go with that one.
Yeah, no problem. And then I've also pasted the second one in as well, just in case you haven't had that. So just while we're waiting for people to maybe have the opportunity to paste that in and look at that information, to talk a little bit about our query language, because you know, queries and scripting and things can be a bit daunting for our customers and for people in IT in general. But from experience, I'm not a developer. I don't write code and these types of things. It is actually quite straightforward, and we do provide some free online training that within about 3 hours, you will get your pencil license when it comes to writing queries and have some good skills to be able to continue from there. I'm not quite sure, Stefan. I'm seeing a few people in the chat talking about not being able to see the query. So guys, so if you're in full screen in Zoom, then you may need to hit the chat button to be able to see the chat. Oh, Sharisha, it looks like Camille sorted you out. Okay, it's very strange. Not quite sure what's going on there. All right.
Thanks for the thanks for the help.
Yeah, thank you very much. We'll be sure to send you a Sumo Logic t-shirt in due course. No problem. All right, thank you. And again, guys, if you're having trouble, feel free to raise your hand and we could pause and dig down. No sweat at all. So as an extension of that, we looked at AWS CloudTrail console login data. We ran a pretty simple query to pull out where we had multiple logins from users on different IP addresses. We then turn those IP addresses into something visual. But an IP address is an IP address, whether it's 1.2.3.4 or 100.200.100. It really means nothing to us. So activity 2 is going to show you how easy it is to integrate your logs and the data in your logs against the Sumo Logic threat intelligence. When using activity 2, testing threat intel lookup with sample indicators of compromise, or otherwise known as IOCs. So we're going to use our threat intel app. So we're going to give you a example of how easy it is to deploy our pre-existing contents. When we deploy our threat intelligence app, if it doesn't show anything, that's actually a good thing. That means that those IP addresses are not known bad actors, and you're not having bad people infiltrate with touch your environment, right? So enough talking. So let's get into the lab. So we're going to run this particular query. So again, let me paste this query into. Actually, let me run through this firstly myself, and then we'll paste it in. So I'll paste it in, but then we'll go through it together as well. So I'll just clean up the formatting here. Okay, so there's the query that we want to work with. So in this case, when we have the query, we want to, it's actually a good question. I do not believe, do we append it to this query? I don't think so.
Hey, Mike, I think I know what the problem might be. Sorry to interrupt. When you post into the Slack, can you just make sure you have everyone selected in the drop-down box? For me, it shows that you're posting to host and panelist. Okay. That might be a reason why.
That's absolutely the reason why. Sorry, guys. User error there. My apologies. So I've now pasted the second query to everyone. So everyone should be able to see that. When you copy that query, we actually want to run a new log search. So up in the top left-hand corner again, we're going to hit new and hit log search again. We can paste in that query and we can hit enter. So I'll just give everybody an opportunity to do that, and apologies for the first little issue there with sending it to only selected few. All right, so what this particular query is doing is it's looking up, so the environment that we're working with here is a demonstration environment. So some of the data is synthetic, but as a mechanism to be able to demonstrate some of this type of stuff, we're running this particular query here, and what it's doing is it's checking this particular IP address, and it's looking at whether CrowdStrike has any data related to this IP address, and the answer is yes. And then it's looking at the malicious confidence level. So obviously that's rated in a kind of traffic light style, low, medium, and high severity score there, right? So if we come back to our query here, so we then want to add this particular component to the query, or this particular line to the query. Paste this back into the chat. Samuel, hey, I think you have prevent participants from saving chat enabled. I'm not aware of that feature. I'll paste it again. Are you able to, is anyone else having issues getting that information out of the chat? I apologize. If I had everyone's email address, I would send you this workshop PDF, but I don't. And with the Zoom webinar, there's no way to share a file, I don't believe. Maybe there is. Okay, that might help as well. So there you go, Sam. If you are having issues, I've actually shared the Security Analytics Workshop PDF with you. You'll be able to copy it directly out of there. Okay, no problem. Thanks, mate. Okay, so if we look at what this particular line of the query is doing, so what it's saying here is if the IP address and the malicious confidence is null, meaning that there is no result, then it will return a no in the data exists. So we can add this to our query here. So if we come into our query, remember to hit Shift and Enter to go to the next line, and we can add that particular line to the query and rerun it. We can now see that we're having a bit more information in here. Quite sure that line does actually. So now that we've, okay, now I understand. So step 3. So you know, what we're doing here, or what we just did is we added a line to our query to say if the IP address doesn't have any information, then instead of showing nothing, show a no. So we're working with this particular IP address at the moment, which is one that we know is no good, right? But say, for example, you enter in a different IP address, maybe your own IP address, right? So that's maybe a good example. So if we come and we just do a Google search for what's my IP address, you should be able to see what your IP address is, wherever you are, whether you're at work or you're at home. So, you know, let's see if your IP address is known as a bad IP address, as an example. So copy your IP address, and you can come back to the query and replace the IP address that's being searched for, as an example. And when we rerun that query, you can see that in my case, and I hope nobody's going to attack me now that you know my IP address, you can see that no data exists for my address. Whereas if we were to use the IP address from as the example, right, the 84.112 that I pasted into the chat, results are returned. So we're in real time looking up every IP address that comes into the environment and able to render that information, right? And this is kind of an example of, you know, that it is real-time information. Okay, great. All right, activity 3. So going to give you an example now of a common log source, which is the AWS ELB load balancer. Now, it could be ALB, it could be any log source that you have that we are already having existing content for. And we have content for hundreds, probably 1,000 different applications, right? So if you go to our website, you can see all of the applications that we exist, or if you have any particular applications and infrastructure that you're running, feel free to type it into the chat and we can talk to you about that. But ELB and ALB are very common AWS services that a lot of our customers use. So we're going to install the Threat Intel app into your tenants. And the Threat Intel app is going to allow us to correlate the load balancer data against CrowdStrike's threat intelligence, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So if we come to our Sumo Logic console, in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see a menu, and we want to hit the app catalog menu. And then, so if you can't see that menu and your screen looks like something like this, then in the top left-hand corner, if you hit the three dots or the three lines here, that'll open the menu for you. You can come to the app catalog, and then once you're in that app catalog, come to AWS, Amazon Web Services. And we want to use the third one, which is the ELB Elastic Load Balancer application. Let me just check that's the case. Actually, no, we don't. I apologize. We want to use the Threat Intel Quick Analysis app. Okay, helps when I follow the documentation, Michael. So in here, we want to go, actually in the search, we can just type in the word threat. No, quick. Just check here.
Yeah, try your search now, Mike. That keeps catching me out. It's because if you don't have all categories at the top, it filters it down. There you go.
I see. Sorry. Okay, no problem. So under all categories, just type in the word threat. And the one that we're looking for is the Threat Intel Quick Analysis, which is the one that I kind of showed before. So we click on that. In here, we want to then add to library. And inside the lab, we want to, in the source category, we want to enter in this information. So let me type that into the chat for everyone. So what it's going to ask us to do is to set a name for this particular application. So we could call it Threat Intel for AWS ELB, something like that. You can call it whatever you'd like. It's just a text name. And then it's going to ask us for what's called a source category. And a source category is basically the metadata or the location of where we're storing your ELB logs. So in this case, we want to enter labs/AWS/ELB. Once we've done that, we then hit add to library. And we're going to install all of the content, all of the dashboards, all of the searches, all of the queries into your environment now. You should get a confirmation in the bottom left-hand corner if that was successful. Once we've done that, if we move to the navigation in the top left-hand corner, if you can see my mouse, and we click on personal, this will show you all of the different logs and applications that you have access to. So obviously in this training environment, we only have the one, which is the one that we're working with now. So if you expand that folder, you will start to see all of the different, and you can resize this if you'd like. You can start to see all of the different dashboards that we have, which are rendered here in green, the green icon. And then all of the different search queries that we have rendered here as the red icon, right? So if we go back and we refer to our documentation, okay, so there's no further instructions. So, okay, so we can look through, we can click, you probably are, if you're anything like me, I tend to jump ahead sometimes. We can now look at some of this information or look at this app and look at some of the types of information that we have. So here we're looking at only ELB logs. So you can see in the last 15 minutes, 2,120 lines of ELB logs sent into Sumo Logic. 65 IP addresses found in those logs related to known bad addresses. Obviously, there's no file hash information or no email information because the logs that we're looking at in this case are ELB logs. Not going to have endpoint information or email information in them, right? If you scroll down to the bottom here, we can start to get an idea of threats over time, right? So this would allow you to see, if you have a particular time where you're having a lot of these threats coming in, maybe you're being attacked and these types of things. Again, we can set notifications that, hey, if I'm to receive more than X number of threats on my ELB logs in X period of time, then send a notification or send an alert, etc. Again, and maybe just in closing, if we're to choose another one of these dashboards, maybe we could choose the URL one. So again, the URL one is now going to show us the specific ELB URL or the URL that the ELB was serving, what that URL was that was accessed, the malicious confidence, and then how many times it was seen, and some raw security information that we're bringing back from CrowdStrike. Right, a lot of downloaders, a lot of malware related stuff on the load balancers, right? Likewise, we could hit IP, the IP dashboard over here in the left-hand side, and we can start to see where those addresses are coming from, threats over time, which load balancers, what types of actors, and then this threat table here, that if we hit this plus button, we can blow up these results, right? Excellent. So I believe that's the end of the lab per se. So let me just come back and summarize in kind of one screen here. So if we looked at maybe just a summary or some key points that I've covered today. So everything I've shown you today is one solution. It's one platform, very, very straightforward. You're now aware that Sumo Logic could assist you not only with the security analytics, but potentially if you had IT operations people or non-technical stakeholders in your business as well, that we would be able to turn their raw event data and turn that into rich visualizations as well, right? You're now aware that Sumo Logic is built 100% on top of the AWS cloud, but we're able to pick up data and logs from any on-premise environments, hybrid IT, or any other multi-cloud service that you might be using. And the fact that we are a true SaaS solution, so very easy to start, very easy to get going. Great. Thank you everyone for your time on this particular component. What we're going to do now is, I believe it's 1 o'clock in Australian Eastern Standard Time, or wherever you may be, 11 a.m. in Singapore. So we're going to give you a 15-minute break. Feel free to stretch your legs, have a cup of coffee, check on your kids if you're working from home like many of us. And then we will reconvene at 15 minutes past the hour to cover off the second part of the session. The second part of the session is more of an advanced solution. Stefan has had a lot of experience, 15 plus years, I believe, 20 plus years in security. So if you are of a mid to higher level security caliber and pedigree, there'll be some great information in there. So thank you everyone for your time. I'm going to pause and stop the screen share. We will see you at 1/4 past the hour. Thanks very much. All right, guys, Michael here. So I just wanted to thank everyone for their time. We've got a couple of minutes before we're due back. So in 2 to 3 minutes, Stefan will take over. Stefan, I might pass the reins over to you, mate.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Okay. Okay, yeah, what do we like? A couple more minutes. So we'll just give it till 15:15 for everybody to start up. Just for interest as well, I've posted a couple of links into the chat session there with some more information with regards to Sumo. The first link I've sent is where you can go in and sign up for a free trial. That will essentially allow you to go and do a bit more exploring on the platform that Mike has showed you so far today. The second link is a little bit more information around what we're going to have a look at this afternoon. And then finally, there's a third link there as well. So we've got a fireside chat happening on Thursday. I said next week, but I've got a feeling it might not be. Hang on, let me just double check my date. No, sorry, it is the 23rd of September, not next week. Wishing time away, that's what lockdown does for you. That's definitely worth attending if you're able to, spend an hour with us again on that date. The two customers that are going to join us on that fireside session are two pretty interesting customers, both kind of largely cloud focused and customers that I recently helped with, with improving their security visibility with Cloud SIM. So 23rd of September, 12 o'clock AEST, if you can sign up, or if you want to sign up and join that session, we'd welcome you to be there. And yeah, definitely looks like it's going to be a really good session, that one. Okay, bear with me 2 seconds. Let me just get my screens ready here a second. Hang on. Okay, great. So you guys should be able to see my my screen there, no problem. Okay, so yeah, my name is Stefan Tapp. So as you can see on the screen there, I'm an enterprise solutions engineer for Sumo Logic. Been with Sumo for, I think it'll be 12 months next week, actually. Previously worked for a couple of other SIM vendors, based out of not quite Sydney. I live on the Central Coast, New South Wales, but cover the whole of Asia Pacific and Japan as well. Been in security operations, I guess, for around about 20 years. Various different roles, from being a SOC analyst to working for a managed service provider. Was involved in building out the first managed service SOC in Western Australia a couple of years ago. So I've kind of gone full circle from being that typical security analyst through to helping organizations improve their security posture and so on. So what we're going to talk about this afternoon in this session, and I'm going to give you guys the opportunity as well to do a bit of a hands-on session, is on our Cloud SIM Advanced or Cloud SIM Enterprise product. Okay. It's quite different than what you have seen so far this morning. Essentially, it's kind of an overlay. It's still part and parcel of the whole Sumo Logic platform, but it's kind of an overlay. It does a little bit more processing focused around security operations and that area. So what I want to touch on here is this particular part of our solution. Popped up into the Gartner Magic Quadrant this year for SIM, and this was the first time for Sumo that we've appeared under this particular category with Gartner. And as you can see from this slide here, we came in as a visionary, and that's certainly something we're all pretty proud of here. Like I said, as somebody who's kind of done my time as a SOC analyst. The product and the work that's gone into it definitely has done it justice. And to have that verified now by Gartner is a pretty good spot to be in. So this is really kind of a quick heads up view of what our dashboard looks like. And as you guys will agree, it's quite different than the core product that we've shown you so far today. What I'm going to do in a second is actually just jump in and give you a quick quick kind of power demo of the product itself. Then what we'll do is we'll jump back out and we'll actually go through as a SOC analyst and perform an investigation. I'll give you some credentials to log into. If you still have your session open from this morning, that's great. We can actually access Cloud SIM from that particular session. If not, then I'll refresh you with the credentials that you'll need to log in. Okay. And again, just as a reminder, feel free to post any questions into the Q&A, and Mike and myself will take care of those as we go through. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is just jump across actually into the product itself and talk a little bit about what we can see here. So this is what we call our heads-up display. You might kind of notice it's got a bit of a kind of computer game feel to it. And it was kind of designed that way. The person that designed our heads-up display within Cloud SIM actually did a lot of work for World of Warcraft, I think it was. It's designed really to have a visually, appealing product, but to be highly functional as well, and not like your traditional multi-window SIM platforms that some of you may be familiar with. Essentially here, I'll give you a quick tour of what's on this main page, and then we'll start to dig in a little bit deeper. Up here in the top left-hand corner, these are my kind of event metrics, for want of a better phrase. So 12 million records, those are my events that are being forwarded in from the Sumo core platform. Essentially, everything comes into the core platform, and then anything that I want to process with things like real-time correlation, additional threat intelligence, and those kind of things, we forward those across on a source-by-source basis. Okay. So again, those event types could be anything from AWS, CloudTrail, GuardDuty, VPC logs, right the way down to more traditional on-premise solutions, maybe something like Windows Active Directory, endpoint security logs from CrowdStrike, Carbon Black, McAfee, etc. Okay. And then additionally, your usual kind of firewall logs, whether those are cloud native or whether they're on-premise, you can forward all of those into this core platform. They essentially come in as a raw event. And what happens is with those events, they get some additional context applied to them. So if the event contains an IP address or it contains a URL, then automatically upon ingestion, we enrich that event with additional information. So we might do a lookup against some threat intelligence feeds to find out whether it's a known bad IP or known bad URL. We also add in things like geo information. We might do an entropy score against the URL, for example. Okay. And then what happens with all that additional context, that then becomes what we call a record within the platform. Those 12 million records that we can see here in the last 24 hours, they get processed across our signals engine. Think of that as more of a rules engine if you're familiar again with other SIM platforms. We have somewhere around 450 to 500 out-of-the-box rules. Those are managed and curated by Sumo Logic as part of our SaaS solution. Additionally, on top of that as well, you can create custom content within the platform. So, if I've got a customer-facing login application that's been written in-house, I can actually ingest those events into Cloud SIM, create some content around there, and look for some unusual activity against my customer base, etc. So essentially, that signals processing engine has brought those records down to 525,000 signals. Okay. In a more traditional SIM platform, that's where I would spend my time as a security analyst. And I've certainly been in that position, both myself and working with other customers as well, where we've had to come in and wade through that many alerts. One unfortunate customer I worked with was logging somewhere around about 9 million of those a day on an older SIM platform. It's incredibly difficult, right, to prioritize what's important out of all those signals. how do I determine what's bad? How do I link signals together? So then what happens within Cloud SIM itself, we have an additional layer called our insight clustering capability. Those 526,000 signals that we can see there, they get applied across our insight clustering engine. And that insight clustering engine is looking at who's the entity involved. Okay, the entity there could be a username, could be an IP address, could be a host name, etc. It also looks at the severity score of each of those signals that are being generated. And then as a third piece of information, it's actually looking back in time as well. Out of the box, we look back over 14 days, but that can be adjusted further back if we need to. It gives me the ability now to start looking for low and slow attacks. I'll give you a prime example there. If I manage to send a phishing email to a user, get them to click onto a fake Office 365 link and then obtain their credentials, I might log in as that user, log into their mailbox, and then spend a few days just looking at who they are, what's their job role, who do they collaborate with. Then after maybe 4 or 5 days, I might use those credentials to start looking further inside the environment. What file shares do they have access to? What else in the platform in that environment can I get access to? And I might space that out over a couple of weeks, purely to kind of make sure I'm not being detected as generating too much noise in one go. So our insight clustering capability essentially grabs all of those related signals, it clusters them together, and then when the severity score combined reaches a threshold, okay, it clusters them together and presents them into what we call an insight. Essentially, the insight clustering engine is doing an automated tier 1 analyst role. Instead of more traditionally, getting let's say I get a firewall alert to say that a user's downloaded something, and it's a known bad location. Then I'd have to do a search on that user, find out what other activity they've been up to within a similar time frame. Our insight clustering is tracking that automatically. Okay, and then it clusters those together for me. That same information is kind of repeated here on this main radar view. Okay, so my external circle here are my records. The inner ring here are those signals that are being generated. And then finally, the insights appear as these colored triangles. The color of these will be dependent on the different status. So red is new, green I think is in progress, amber is in progress, green is closed, and white is assigned to a dedicated team or function, for example. Okay. Over here in this top right-hand corner, this is a quick snapshot view of my latest insight that's been generated. It's kind of like a baseball card view. Tells me who the entity is. In this case, it's a user called Deb Smith. Tells me how many signals are part of this cluster, what the severity level is. The little crosshair that you can see in the center there, this one doesn't show much because it's actually a single high severity signal that's generated this. But if this particular one was a cluster of multiple signals, then I would see those signals dotted along these axes. Okay, left to right on the horizontal is just my timeline, and then that vertical axis there is the severity score. So the higher the severity signal, then the higher up it's going to appear on this vertical axis. Okay. Global confidence. This is a really cool feature that we have. And again, this kind of leans to the fact that we're a SaaS-based platform. Essentially what happens with all of our insights that are generated, when our customers go through and investigate those and they close them off, they'll close it off as problem resolved or no action or maybe false positive. What happens then is both within the customer's environment and also from a SaaS provider perspective, we take some of the analytics from how that's been closed. All of that data is anomalized. And then we kind of leverage that then across all the other insights that get generated. So every time an insight's generated in another customer environment, we look at some of the metrics around that particular insight, and we can give a global confidence rating. So the higher the rating, the more confident we are that it's a real incident. The lower the rating, then more likely it is that it'll either be a false positive, or it could just be, you know, something new that's appeared that hasn't had enough data or data to give us that information. Okay, so it's another useful aid for a security analyst to be able to pick, you know, the insights that are high severity, you know, and high global confidence. The panel underneath it here is just a quick snapshot view of my latest activity. So it'll show me, you know, which of my analysts are working on specific insights. And then any new insights that are generated, you'll see that same information being populated there. Okay. Finally, over here on this on this left-hand side, these are some of my typical kind of SOC metrics that I might track. Things like mean time to detect, mean time to respond, mean time to remediate. So my detection is how long between the first signal and the last signal before the insight was generated. Mean time to respond is that point when, you know, the insight is created to the point where I've assigned it as in progress. And then mean time to remediate is how long it's actually taking me to investigate and then close that insight. We pass all of these metrics back into the core platform. We have some pretty comprehensive dashboards for SOC related workflows in there as well. One thing you may notice as I go through, all of our insights are generated using the MITRE attack framework tags, okay? And that's both from a tactic and a technique level. So here you can see this particular one is lateral movement with execution. We also pass that information back in as well. So, you know, I can get a quick view of which of the stages of the attack framework are most prevalent in my environment and so on. So let's jump in and have a quick look at an insight. So this view here is what we call our Kanban viewboard. Okay, so now putting my SOC analyst hat on, this is where I would come in and start doing my day-to-day work and investigation. If I want to reassign anything here that's in this new column, I simply just drag it across to the relevant team. Okay, when I've released it, you'll see it's reassigned it here to this spec ops team, for example. As I mentioned just a second ago, you know, I've got my global confidence ratings here. So if I wanted to sort these according to the confidence score, then I can come in and just do that as well. Okay, so you can now see that my highest confidence score rating are showing at the top. So as a SOC analyst, I might want to prioritize the highest rating incidents first. Okay. I want to, let me just set this back to creator time. Hang on a second. So yeah, so this is going to give me the opportunity here to kind of pick my latest ones appearing at the top of the list and so on. Okay. For any one of these particular ones, if I need to go in now and do some investigation, I can just simply come down, you know, look at ones that I'm currently either working on or ones that I need to look at. I'm going to pick this dev server one because I think this is quite an interesting one from an AWS perspective. So as soon as I've clicked on that insight, it's taking me now to this is what I would call my kind of workbench view. A couple of main panels of interest here. My left-hand panel there is where I can do some of my workflow activity. Okay, so if I want to assign this particular insight to myself, okay, I would just reassign it to me. Contains some of that information. Here's the entity, which is a host name in this particular case. Global confidence score, overall severity rating, and then some information here around how many signals are part of this insight cluster. When was it generated? And these are those, the MITRE attack framework tags that I mentioned as well. Okay, so I can get a quick snapshot view of what's happening there. In my main workbench view, again, I have that kind of histogram view, with my timeline running from left to right. So I can see that this has happened roughly over 4 hours. Okay, first signal generated at 5 p.m. Last couple of signals generating here at 9 p.m. And that ties in with the dwell time of 4 hours here. Okay. To make life nice and easy now, these are all in chronological order. So what I need to do is actually start scrolling down here and having a look at the related security signals, even at this high level. And I can start to build up a picture of what's happened. So first thing I've got here is an AWS guard duty alert telling me that there's a cryptocurrency Bitcoin tool that's being detected on one of my instances. Okay. Again, as I said, we're tracking here on an entity, and that entity is the host name. So you'll see dev server will be pretty consistent in all of these signals as we go through. Coming back to the activity, my second alert here has been generated out of the Sumo core platform. Okay, this is a metrics alert telling me that the CPU has been, over 75% for 5 minutes. So it's a really good point to highlight here. At this particular point, this product is not just bringing in events from log sources, but it's also able to bring in some metric alerts and use those as part of the overall detection capability as well. Then as I scroll down through here, I can see a carbon black alert. I'm running carbon black in my instances. And that's telling me that a known virus or Trojan coin miner was detected. And then finally, as I'm coming down through here, I'm getting a threat intel match off of the file hash for this particular malware that's been installed. Okay. The good thing here as well is I'm also starting to see a username associated with some of these. So now, I got a pretty comprehensive picture here. I've got a user that's installed some form of crypto mining currency into one of my instances. So now my next step here then is to reassign this to the next stage in the workflow. Okay, and obviously depending on what my processes are within my security operations team, it might be something that I would fix as myself as a SOC analyst. I might need to reassign this to the team that looks after my AWS instances and so on. The way we do that is to perform an action on this particular insight. So I have a handful of different options here. I could do something as simple as send an email to another team. I could send a post to a Slack team. Again, it might be the team that's looking after my AWS instances. Okay. If I've got an integration with something like ServiceNow as my third-party ticketing system, then I could pass this into ServiceNow and create a ticket within that platform. If I'm also running something like Sumo Logic's Cloud SOAR or another third-party SOAR product such as Demisto or Phantom, then I can have a full integration here that would go and remediate, automate the remediation phase of this particular thing. So I could do something like contain host on the EDR. Okay. My playbook here within my SOAR platform may be set to quarantine this instance from the environment. I could have a whole stack of different options there that I could pass this off to. Okay. So for this particular one, I'm going to choose contain host on EDR. I just click on execute. Okay, and now that's gone away and quarantined that off of the network, for example. If I'm ready now to close the insight, I come in here, mark my resolution as resolved. You'll remember I talked a little bit around some of these actions and how they have an impact on this global confidence rating. So if I'm marking this as resolved, what I'm saying is, yes, this was a real incident, okay? And then in the future, any similar insights that are generated will take that into context when they generate this global confidence score. And I would expect to see this score of 55 to increase over time. I might want to add some comments in here. So I could just say, you know, quarantined on EDR. Okay, just as my additional comments. I'm already assigned to me. That's fine. Click on close insight. Okay, and then that insight is closed off. So I think just to kind of take a step back and look at that, that's probably taken me, you know, no more than a couple of minutes to investigate. If I think about where I might have got some of that information on another SIM platform, or if I'm not actually running a SIM platform, you know, I could have got a guard duty alert, and then I'd have to go and do some investigation around, you know, when was it generated, what else happened, you know, at the same time. I could have had an endpoint security alert pop up to say, hey, I've detected malware on this endpoint. And then I'd have to start tracking back to find out what else happened in the lead up to this. Who was the user involved? You know, where's the host? What was the overall impact, etc. Okay. So the key thing there is I'm kind of minimizing the amount of time that this Bitcoin tool was running in my environment and impacting anything else that might have been running on that instance. And it's narrowing it down to literally a couple of minutes on top of the dwell time versus, you know, several hours of additional investigation here before I can remediate and close off this particular incident. So coming back to insights, again, we'll take another quick look at another insight here that's generated. This one actually is quite nice and easy. This is, you know, associated with a username in this instance. Now, because this is coming off of a Sentinel-1, so it's coming off of my endpoint security alert, the severity rating for this particular alert is pretty high anyway. So it's already pushed through my threshold. That threshold out of the box would have been 13 points of severity, okay, to trigger this into an insight. But because this single security signal has a severity level of 16, it's automatically promoted that straight away. So I have 0 dwell time. You know, this is a live one-to-one detection of malware, okay, and it's generated that for me. Again, all of the key pieces of information I need are here. I've got the host name, I've got the user involved, the file path where it's been executed from. If I want to dig a little bit deeper, I can actually click on this signal itself. And you can see I've now got a whole stack of further information under here as well. Anything that you notice here with the gold star, that allows me to favorite this particular field up here into the header. Okay, so again, it's designed to make my investigation quick and easy. Just in this header alone, I can see, you know, where the alert has come from. What's the host name? What's the IP address? Is it an internal IP? Yes. What was the file path? You know, what's the threat name and the user involved? Okay. But I still have all of my traditional fields you would expect with an event from that particular source. And this will be the same, whether it's a firewall alert, whether it's a CloudTrail alert, it'll contain all of the relevant fields there as well, okay? But on top of that, you know, the key ones we're going to extract out here for this high level view. Some additional things I can do here as well. We have the ability to kind of integrate with other products. So if I come next to my file hash here, okay, click on my little 6 dots there, and I want to integrate to a favorite external lookup, something like VirusTotal. Then I have the ability to be able to do that within the platform. I don't have to copy the file hash and then go to another website and paste it in. So here, for example, you know, this particular malware that we've detected, yeah, I can see it's detected as bad on 25 out of 67 engines. So that further kind of helps me as an analyst to determine that, you know, this is a real incident, etc. It doesn't show up in this particular one, but if I also have an integration, i.e. I've got an account with something like VirusTotal, Using a built-in API, it would also give me that information up here under enrichments. Okay, so I could click on the enrichment tab and it'll show me that same kind of information here within the solution itself. So that kind of sums up at a pretty high level how our insight clustering capability works. Okay, so again, just to kind of talk to the key points there, we take those 12 million raw events, we pass additional enrichment information into those to create the record. That gets applied across our signal engine, and those 450 to 500 signals or rules detect, most of the common threats across all of the common vendor solutions you'd expect. So all of your endpoint security, your firewall, your cloud solutions, email, etc., etc. We take that one step further. Those signals are then applied across that insight clustering capability. Okay, and then that's what's given me this lower number of investigations to look at. So certainly, as somebody who's done time as a SOC analyst, I'd rather be investigating 7 things that matter than having to wade through 526,000 alerts and try and find those 7 things on my own. It's a really, really strong part of the solution, to be able to automate that level 1 analyst role for me. Okay, let me pivot back to here a second. Just to cover off a couple of other key points. So, as with our core platform, Cloud SIM is, it's born and built in the cloud. It auto scales for you. So if I'm suffering from something like a denial of service attack, okay, and suddenly I've got 20 times more events coming into the platform than normal, then we automatically scale compute to take care of that. It's not a case that, if you've got an on-premise solution, suddenly it grinds to a halt because it just can't handle the ingest load. And when you're in the middle of a major security incident, that's certainly not something that you want to happen. Again, to kind of slightly differentiate this from the core platform, here we're focused on real-time security events. So where the core platform allows me to do that kind of, dashboarding capability and reporting, the Cloud SIM is kind of doing that real-time correlation for me, okay, and it's correlating there across multiple sources. So it doesn't matter whether I've got a presence in AWS, if I've also got a presence in Azure, I've also got a presence in GCP, and I've also got legacy on-premise. Cloud SIM Enterprise will be able to correlate across all of those ingested sources, okay. The key thing we saw there with that insight clustering is to reduce the false positives and alerts. Alert fatigue is one of the biggest problems we have within security operations. And kind of going back to some of the slides that Mike showed earlier on, that problem is growing and growing. The more we move into cloud, the more the more events we generate, and the bigger the alert fatigue problem grows. And we just can't throw enough resources at it. We know that it's really hard to get people in the security industry, and trying to recruit security analysts in a SOC is really, really hard, let alone keep them once you've got them in there. So by being able to reduce that alert fatigue and give SOC analysts something that they know they can use on a day-to-day basis, that helps with that particular problem as well. Matching all of those alerts to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Again, that's an area that I've seen grow in the last few years. If I'd gone back maybe 4 or 5 years, very rarely would I work with a customer that was using the MITRE ATT&CK framework in any kind of anger. But that's changed. A lot of people now are using that framework to be able to understand which areas are they vulnerable in? Is it in exfiltration? Is it discovery, etc.? And then clustering those alerts together, again, streamlining and reducing my investigation time, being able to investigate within a matter of minutes compared to several hours that we would traditionally have to do. And then finally, kind of coming back to that really cool heads up display, having a platform that not only looks good, but it's really functional, has a nice, easy, straightforward workflow. Those are all key things that you want to have, in your kind of next gen SIM platform. I just want to run through this one as well. This is an interesting one. So this was a proof of value we did with a customer. Over 45 days, this particular customer ingested over 10 billion records. Okay. Those records, when they were processed across the signals, ended up in 9.8 million signals being generated. And like I said earlier on, that's where a lot of traditional SIM platforms stop. That's where I'd have to go and sift through that 9.8 million to try and identify, the key things. So from those 9.8 million, it actually generated around 175 insights. And then from those 175 insights, 95 were determined as being no action required. Okay, so expected behavior, administrators doing something as part of their day-to-day role. Maybe my AWS admin generating alerts in CloudTrail, again, part of their day-to-day role. Not a false positive as such, just expected behavior. 15 of the 175 were actually classified as false positives, and then they would have been referred back for further investigation, fine-tuning, and so on. So that resulted, out of 175 insights that were generated, this customer had 65 true incidents. If you look at those numbers on that right-hand side, where we're going from signal to insight ratio, eventually it brings it down to a false positive rate of around about 9%. I think currently, unfortunately, if you're running on an older SIM platform or a legacy SIM platform, that false positive rate tends to be around about 90%, unless you have spent a vast amount of time and resources in tuning that solution down. All my time as a SOC consultant, most of my customers were running with false positive rates up around that kind of 80–90% in most of the ones I dealt with. Okay. So a good kind of point there to think about is how long would it take you to kind of distill that down, using your current tools and processes, being able to take 10 billion events and bring them down to 65 true incidents over a 45-day period. I've always been a firm believer, as a practitioner within security operations, that if I'm generating more than 10 incidents per analyst per day, then I'm generating too much noise. Essentially, that allows me, on an 8-hour shift, around about 40 minutes to investigate each incident. If I don't have the luxury of 40 minutes to do an investigation, even then that's pretty tight, right? You're going to end up having a platform where you start ignoring things, and that's kind of defeating the whole purpose for us for having SIM platforms in place. So just kind of go over again how our data pipeline, sorry, as my Englishness keeps taking me back to data. So we start off with our collection at the very top here. Okay, those come into the core platform, essentially created as messages or events. Those are then forwarded across from the core platform into Cloud SIM Enterprise. Cloud SIM Enterprise does the normal kind of parsing and mapping of all of those common security sources that we'd have. And again, we're talking everything there from cloud, AWS, CloudTrail, right the way down to Windows events coming off of a domain controller. We parse, we map those across to our schema within Cloud SIM. That allows me to normalize things like a username, okay? So if I'm searching for a user, Deb Smith, it doesn't matter where her name is coming up from, whether it's coming off of a firewall or Active Directory. I know that I'm normalizing that name across all of my records. So if I do a search for Deb to see what she's been up to, then I know I'm going to get results back that will be consistent across all of those platforms. Those records are enriched, as I mentioned. We bring in geo information. We do a lookup for threat intelligence to see whether they're known bad IPs, file hashes, and so on. Those records then get processed across our rules engine. Out of the box, currently there's somewhere around 450 to 500 of those. And again, just to touch on that point, it's really easy to be able to go in and create your own content as well. It's probably one of the most straightforward platforms I've ever worked with when it comes to content creation. It's all UI driven. It's all really straightforward and easy to follow. Okay. And then finally, those signals come through the correlation clustering, the insight clustering capability. They get pieced together into the insights. And those are those actionable security investigations that we do as part of our day-to-day work as a security analyst. Okay, I'm going to get you guys now to actually have a play within Cloud SIM itself. So, if you still have your session open from earlier on, great, because that's what you're going to use for this particular case. Okay, well, actually, I've got one open here already. Does anybody need me to post these credentials back into the chat, or are you okay to grab them from earlier? Let me just grab that anyway. So, copy link address. Okay, I'm just going to post these back in just as a reminder. So that's the URL to go to the platform. Again, just replace the hashes there with 3 random digits. Okay, so I'm going to put an example in here of 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's going to be your user logon. And then, whoops, go back. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Hang on. It's what happens when you've got too many screens open. There we go. Let me just copy that a second. That's not going to let me copy it. Okay, you guys can see that password there, right? Sept with a T, 2021 and an exclamation mark. I'll give you a couple of seconds just to get that set up and running. And then I'm just going to get you to do one more change for me before you do. Okay. Okay, hopefully you're all logged in. So on the main screen itself, down in that bottom left-hand corner, okay, if you can click on your username and then select preferences. And then you'll see the web session timeout value. I think by default it's set to 15 minutes. Because we jump across into Cloud SIM, it might time out whilst we're working in there. So if you can just change that web session timeout to 1 day and then click on save. I must make a note to get our training teams to update that to 1 day by default. Okay, and once you have done that, down in the bottom left-hand corner, let me just change my share a second. That one. Sorry, too many things open here. Correct. No, wrong one. Where's my Safari gone? There it is. Sorry, knew I'd get there in the end. hopefully you guys can see my Safari. I've not got a border around it. Mike, can you confirm that you can see the core product there?
I can, yes, you're in the preferences screen, yes.
Awesome. Okay, great, thanks. Okay, no worries, thanks for that. Okay, so if everybody's changed their preferences there then to 1 day, okay, and you've clicked on save, then all you need to do is click on this Cloud Sim Enterprise over here on the left-hand side, okay, and then that should take you across into the Cloud Sim heads-up display. Okay, so hopefully you're all kind of sat there at that screen. I'm going to switch back to my presentation so that you can follow on your instances locally. Let me come back and make sure I get the right one. There we go. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to take you through a guided insight now. The one we're going to take a look at will be called is called persistence with initial access. Okay, kind of ignore the triangle bit in the center there. That's not where we're not going to click to go through there. On the main page at the top, you have that set of tabs. So if you can click on the one called Insights for me. And then that should bring you into that Kanban view board that I talked about with you guys earlier, okay. And you should see, if your screen's the same as my one, there's about 305 insights listed in that left-hand side there at the moment, okay. And the first one we're going to have a look at is it's Insight 318, persistence with initial access. Okay, so if you can click on that one for me. Now, one thing I will point out, because this is actually a shared environment, you're not in a unique instance of Cloud Sim like you were with the core product. You might find that some things in here kind of change slightly to what I'm talking you through. That's purely because we're kind of updating this one in real time with multiple users. So I apologize for that if something doesn't appear quite as it should do. Okay, so the view that you're in now, over on that left-hand side, sorry, my presentation screen's gone to the wrong one. Yeah, okay. If kind of, we'll stick to this screen here. So essentially, this one here then is this is an email one that's come through. Okay, and if you come to the main panel where you can see those security signals that are listed. Okay, have a little scroll down through those signals. And the first one that you'll notice there is a threat intel match on a file hash. So I'm hoping you're all good and everybody is kind of at the same point I am. This is what I could do with the luxury of being able to share two screens over Zoom. As we scroll down through, there's a couple of key things I want you to kind of keep a note of as you're scrolling down. So the first thing is the threat intel device one. Make a mental note of that severity score for me, okay, which should be showing us 3 points. Then as you scroll down through, the second alert there is coming off of my Proofpoint email threat solution, okay, and that's telling me that a user has received an email with a phishing link. Again, make a mental note, add that severity score to the first one, which should give you 7 points. Then as I'm scrolling down again, my third alert here generated to come off of my checkpoint firewall. Okay, so this is a checkpoint threat emulation malicious file allowed. And this one has a severity score of 3 points. Okay, so we're up to kind of 10 points there at the moment. Then as I scroll down, my final security alert or signal here is coming from CrowdStrike. Detection summary event saying that this particular zip file here has been detected as malicious. Okay, a couple of things to point here. You'll notice underneath it says list matches. And then there's some list names there, file hash, advanced persistent threat, APT. So this is where we're automatically leveraging some threat intel feeds that we bring into the platform. It's done that lookup for me and said, hey, this file hash for this file name is known bad. Okay, hence the reason why we're getting that information populated there as well. Add 5 points for this severity. You should have a total there of 15 points in total. Okay. So again, that ties back into what I said earlier on. Our point threshold for generating an insight is 12 points. That's our kind of level where we need to be above that level. So anything that generates 13 points or more of risk will cluster all of these signals together that we can see and then bring that together into an insight for me. Okay. So again, if you kind of put a SOC analyst hat on, right? If you guys haven't kind of done that role before, go back up to the very top and then start to scroll down. And then as you're scrolling down, making a note of each of those signals that are generating. So the first thing, I've got a threat intel match here again on that file hash, which seems a bit out of sequence to me, but there we go. Then I've got an email alert to say a user's received a phishing link in an email. Next thing is I've got a firewall alert to say that a malicious file has downloaded. So now mentally I'm building this picture, my users received a phishing email, they've clicked on the link, they've downloaded malware, and then the malware is being detected by CrowdStrike, which is sitting on my endpoint, whether that's a desktop or a laptop or something. So I've got that complete picture there of what that user has done. Okay. Again, going back to either not having a SIM platform or having an older SIM platform, you might have got an antivirus alert, a malware alert from your endpoint solution, whether that would be CrowdStrike, Carbon Black, or so on. And then I'd have to start searching in the platform, maybe jumping to different consoles, go and have a look at my email gateway to look to see what this user's received. Maybe look at my firewall events. If I've got a web gateway device, then maybe go and have a look at that to see what the user's downloaded. Now, typically from experience, a user phishing email where they've clicked on a link or it's got an attachment that they've executed, that probably used to take me about 2 hours to investigate. But here within Cloud SIM, I can build that picture of what's happened literally within a couple of minutes. Okay. So what will my next steps be from this? And I'm going to let you guys go ahead and do some of these steps for me. So here's that kind of conclusion we've just made. Okay, this is likely a successful phishing attack. The user has clicked on the link, something's been downloaded. At this particular point, I don't know what that file is. Could be, opening up a backdoor to something for persistence. It could be a keylogger, stealing whatever the user is going to be typing into to the keyboard, etc. Okay. So the next step here really is, we've built that picture of what's happened. We might speak to the user. They might say, yeah, sorry, I've got this email. I clicked on the link. I didn't mean to. And then as an action, we might, again, send this off to another team to take that machine off the network, quarantine it, re-image it, do a full scan. If I'm running that SOAR capability that we've talked about a little bit, then I could automate that response. Okay, I could send this off to quarantine that EDR from the endpoint. If I thought the user here had clicked on a link and gone to a fake phishing site for Office 365 or something, then I could, get a password change reset done for that user, that kind of thing. Okay. So our steps there are pretty straightforward on what we would do. So as an action here, then what we're going to do is we're going to just go in and email this to the SOC team. Again, feel free to kind of follow me through with this on your local instances. So you're just going to click on action, then click on email to SOC team, which should be in that list there somewhere, I'm hoping. No, it's not. Okay. Somebody's deleted my action. Okay, so just choose something like email insight. Okay, that's going to be a pretty similar action. I would normally have a unique action set up there depending on who I wanted to set this to. So I could have, email to SOC team, email to the network team, email to desktop team, AWS team, whoever's likely to be the person to resolve or perform an action on this particular insight. Okay, I can have multiple actions there. So then you would just choose something like email insight, click on the execute button, okay, and then that would email that off to that particular team. The next step here then would be to close the insight. Okay, so if you click on close insight, you'll get that box pop up there with your resolutions. So here I would probably mark this as resolution as resolved. Okay, in my comments there, I might type something in like, spoke to user and machine quarantine from network or something. Okay, so if you guys want to go in and do whatever you want to do there, feel free to do that. Like I said, you might get a couple of errors pop up if you all do it at the same time, but feel free just to click on those actions and close insight and kind of explore the options that are there. Okay. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to leave this screen up. Let me just get all of the steps there. So this is a typical kind of workflow that we've just kind of gone through. I'm going to let you guys actually go in and do this yourselves in a second. I'll point you to an insight and then leave you for a few minutes to go in and have a go yourselves. So the first thing we would do there is pick our insight. Normally I would do that from within the insights page. Again, we talked a bit about how we could prioritize that according to global insight or global scoring, or purely on the time that it's arrived or been generated. We then open it up, examine each of the signals inside, make a conclusion based on those signals, and then take an action. Okay, so again, whether that's emailing it to a specific team, passing it on to a third-party sold product or so on. And then finally, we update the status. Okay, mark it as resolved. If it was a false positive, mark it as false positive, etc. And then, as per usual, I normally encourage people to put additional comments in as well. It just makes it useful because I still have the ability to go and view closed incidents. So as part of training for SOC analysts, I might kind of take them through some of the incidents we've closed in the past, and then use some of those comments as guidelines on how they might want to respond, that kind of thing. Okay, so it's always a good best practice really to put those additional comments in there. Okay. And then you literally go back to the start and pick your next insight and work your way through, and kind of that's how you would go through as a day-to-day role within our platform. I'm going to stop there a second for any questions on what you guys have seen so far. I'm happy to answer any questions around the Cloud SIEM platform. If there's no questions, then we'll go on to the next stage, and I'll let you go into the platform and actually do an investigation yourself, and then we'll kind of regroup and talk about the findings that you had. Just take a quick sip of water while we're waiting for any questions there. Bear with me 2 seconds. Okay, cool. All right, if there's no questions or if any do pop up there, we'll answer those as we go along. So, okay, if you jump back to your Insight page, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at an insight called exfiltration with command and control. Let me tell you what number that will be. Hang on, my session's just timed out. Try that again. Okay, something's told you this was a live environment, things go wrong. When I go back to Insights, my view has disappeared. Hang on a second. Hopefully it's still okay for you. Yeah, okay, I know what's happened. It's just timed me out of the core one. I didn't save that setting. Let's try that again. Okay. Great, okay, that's better. So yeah, if you click on the Insights one, and like I said, the one that I'm going to let you go through and do your investigation on will be the exfiltration with command and control. So if you scroll down through your list, Insight 312, okay, that's the one that you're looking for. The entity name for this one is a user called Rico Dynamite. I'm not sure who comes up with these names, but there we go. Okay, cool. All right, no problem. Let me bring up the workflow for you to follow on screen. Okay, so there's your workflow. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys 10 minutes to actually go through and investigate this one. What we'll do is I'll get you to follow that workflow on the screen that you can see. Okay. Make a note of the signals, and then we'll regroup after 10 minutes and talk about this particular incident and what information we've gathered from it. Okay, so I'm going to start this timer now. I'm just going to go on mute, but if anybody's got any questions, feel free to pop them into the Q&A or the chat channel. Okay, and there goes your 10 minutes. Yay, is it me or was that the longest 10 minutes ever? Okay, let's have a look and see how you guys got on. So hopefully you kind of found your way through that one okay. So that's kind of a multiple choice, this bit, right? But there was kind of multiple signals there that were part of this particular insight. I think I counted, yeah, 5 in total. So kind of 3 of the ones that were part of this, and hopefully, you know, you got the same one, was there was an AWS guard duty alert there for unauthorized access with an instance credential exfiltration. Okay. Second one showing there was threat intel match, an AWS API call. Essentially, that's kind of saying, oh, hey, there's a, you know, APIs are being called here from unusual locations at this point. The third signal as part of this cluster is an API call from a terminated Active Directory account. So those were the kind of first 3 there that we picked out from it. So looking at those signals, hopefully you would have come to a similar conclusion. So to me, it looks like, you know, we've got a terminated employee and that particular user has still got active credentials into AWS, okay, and may well be performing malicious activity. And I kind of come to that conclusion because, you know, a couple of those signals were calling out, high severity alert, malicious user agent was another one there, for example. The fact that the calls are being made for an unusual network. So that's kind of a conclusion that I would come to. So the next step there, using that workflow would be to take an action. So for an example here, as part of my process, I might reassign this to an AWS team to get that user's account locked out completely. If I also have the ability, I might also prevent that IP address from accessing the environment as well. Maybe put the IP onto a blacklist or something like that. Okay, so that kind of summarizes, I guess, this particular insight that was generated, focused around AWS in this instance. I'm hoping that you kind of all came to the same conclusion and got the same signals and so on. So again, here's that kind of quick snapshot here. The user's attempting to run API from a host outside of EC2. There's a threat intel match. Was there a threat intel match? Something popped up there for an IP. Yeah, threat intel match on the IP address. We got an alert to say that we know the Active Directory account's been disabled, but the AWS credentials are still live. And then there was an AWS firewall alert as well for a malicious user agent. Okay. Conclusion from that, really, like I said, is we got a terminated employee. I would be pushing this off probably to a couple of teams for resolution. One is obviously to somebody to get that account removed. But also I would be pushing raising an incident here using whatever my internal process is to the team that handles, the HR aspect of when a user leaves. Clearly something's been missed and we haven't terminated all of the associated accounts and so on for this particular user. So again, it's a good kind of point there to think about, how long would it take you with current tools and processes to detect that same activity? If you're not bringing all of these in to a solution that's doing that kind of correlation across multiple sources and enriching it with threat intelligence and so on, you may end up with a single alert coming off of guard duty or something, but then still have to go and start drilling around, doing searches, spending a couple of hours building up that same picture. And as I'm sure you found as well, the view within Cloud SIM, that ability to just simply scroll up and down and look at those signals that are generated, you can come to that conclusion and build that picture of what's happened literally within a couple of minutes. Okay. So just to kind of reiterate the three key areas then of our Cloud SIM product. The insights correlate lots of signals down. You'll remember seeing hundreds of thousands of security signals there, and the insight clustering and correlation capability has brought that down into that handful of manageable insights to investigate and action. Okay, enriching that information. I mentioned a little bit around, how we enrich things with geo information. We might do an entropy score. We even do things like an Alexa score rank against a URL. But on top of that as well, we also have the capability to plug into other tools within the environment. So if I'm running Active Directory and I'm bringing events in from an on-premise Active Directory, then I can also do Active Directory enrichment as well. Okay, and that'll give me additional context on who the user is, which part of the organization or business unit are they in, what's their normalized name, who's their manager, that kind of information. I can do the same thing with additional context from endpoint security tools such as CrowdStrike or Carbon Black. Okay, that can also give me that additional context. And then leveraging external sources. We talked a bit about how you can use something like VirusTotal with a free API key to be able to give me that additional context for those signals and insights that are generated. And then finally, the ability to automate. I think one key thing I'd like to highlight here, and certainly this is from my experience over the last few years, is a lot of security functions, a lot of security teams, security operations, they focus on the automation of the remediation phase, i.e. using a SOAR capability. But very rarely do we think about how do we automate that investigation phase. And that's exactly what Cloud SIM is able to do using that insight clustering. Excuse me. It has the ability to automate my level 1 analyst. It's going to bring all relevant security signals together for me to make that investigation phase nice and easy. And couple that with, just straightforward workflow within the product as well. Being able to just drag and drop, insights between teams, or if I need to extend that to integration with other products like ServiceNow or Slack and so on. Just making that whole workflow process nice and easy. It helps with all of that SOC efficiency. Sometimes I think if we sit down and think about the processes we typically have within security operations, that can be a good couple of hours wasted per day per analyst, just by not having that streamlined workflow and that kind of thing. So that kind of wraps up that particular part there. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that anybody has. I'll give you a few minutes to post any questions into the Q&A. Anything to do with either the Cloud SIM platform that you've had some hands-on time with, or even the core platform. Mike and I are happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Stefan. Justin here, everyone. What I'll do is in the chat window, I'll post our email addresses so that should you have any questions that spring up post the session, feel free to email us directly with any of those questions you might have. I'm sure there will also be some follow-up collateral that you receive from the marketing engine off the back of attending today's session as well. I mean, personally, I just like to thank you all for your investment in time, for engaging with both Mike and Stefan. It's appreciated. It's a long day. It's a big investment in your time, and thanks again for sticking with it. Hopefully you've learned some more around the Sumo Logic platform capabilities when it comes to security. There's an awful lot of great stuff that you can do with the platform. You just need to know where to start. A couple of other things that it might be worth knowing about. Obviously, if you go to our website, you can create your own free trial. And do your own testing. And we also provide training on the platform at no extra cost as well. So again, that free training can be found through either virtual instructor-led sessions or self-paced sessions as well. And again, any questions around accessing that kind of content, just drop us a note and we can point you in the right direction. But I mean, if there's no further questions, I'm happy to call it a day and give you some time back in your days. Again, thanks to Mike and Stefan for your efforts today as well, and look forward to engaging with everyone in the not too distant future. Much appreciated. Look forward to speaking to you soon.
Yeah, great. Thanks everyone for joining. So it's been a pleasure.